Well, hello and an extremely warm welcome to my channel, and it is really warm outside here in the UK today. A very warm welcome if you're a returning viewer, and an equally warm welcome if you have tuned in to watch my muslings. My muslings. Can you have muslings? That's quite a nice word. Slash musings for the very first time. Haven't even got a sentence out yet, I don't think. So I have been reflecting. Yes, I have. I've been reflecting on my recent reading, and particularly thinking a lot about the Women's Prize, which you know is never too far from my thoughts. And this particular book, Brotherless Night by V.V. Ganeshananthan, because this was the winner, or in case you, I don't know, been under a stone for the last few months, she won the Women's Prize for Fiction 2024 with this novel, Brotherless Night. And it started me thinking, because one of the things about this novel, it's set in Sri Lanka, and it tells the story of the horrendous civil war in Sri Lanka. And it's told through the eyes of a young woman, and I can never remember names. Her name's Sashy, and she is experiencing this horrendous civil war, and she's quite young when the novel starts. She's I think in her late teens. And I was thinking about this young woman and how she'd made such an impression on me, and was trying to sort of think about the qualities in her character that had stayed with me since I'd read the novel, and why it was that her perspective helped me not only to engage with the story, but also the subject matter, because I think this is I've said this many times already, but I think it's a great way of describing it. It's quite a didactic novel. You learn an awful lot about, particularly about the Tamils, because Sashy is one of the Tamil from the Tamil culture, and so she witnesses, she's exploring the conflict herself as it unfolds. And she has, I think it's 4 brothers. Isn't time a terrible thing? It's not that long since I read it, but I think it's 4. And also she's very close to one of their friends as well, called Kay, who becomes a very interesting and important character in the story. And reflecting on her got me reflecting about females in fiction, particularly female protagonists or heroines, or whatever word you want to use, the females that are at the centre of the story. And so I started to scan my shelves and to think about the females that had really stayed with me. So some of the women that I've chosen are women from books that I read years and years and years ago, and some of the women, like this one, who's kind of sparked this all off, is from a book that I read very recently. But they're all females that exhibit some really interesting and important characteristics. And as I've been going through and thinking about it, I've realised that there are some very, very strong repeated qualities that these females have. But equally, there are some females who maybe demonstrate a particular strength that isn't evident in many of the others. So it just got me thinking about the portrayal of women, and why I like reading. I mean, I love reading fiction. I love reading fiction written by men, women, everybody. I'm not, I hope that I don't, that I'm not sort of prejudiced in any way. I think that's one of the reasons you read, is to find out about other people and other people's perspectives. Now, of the 10 books that I've chosen, I'm going to do 5 this time and then 5 in the next video. And of the 10, only one of the books actually is written by a man. And I thought that was quite interesting, but I think that's probably because the balance of my reading has probably been over the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years. I've probably read far more books by women than men, partly because of the time that I'm spending reading the Women's Prize. And maybe I need to redress the balance on that a little bit as well, and have a look at the way that men are writing women, or perhaps why there aren't that many novels by men that I've read in the last few years that give women enough scope to kind of resonate and stay in my mind's eye, as it were. So anyway, so I picked Sashy as a starting point because she is a young girl, as I've said, who's making her way through this horrendous experience in this awful civil war. It completely disrupts her family. Her family are torn apart. But throughout it, she is trying to navigate it in a very thoughtful way. Yes, the book is emotive. Yes, it's emotional. But she's aspiring to be a young doctor. And despite the eruption of civil war, she doesn't allow that to stop her pursuing that dream. So she carries on studying. She carries on going to college. She carries on as far as she possibly can. And I think that quality of resilience and persistence is, as you will see, something that I think is really important in my fictional females. So that was a quality that really struck me about her. And the other thing about her is her capacity to love. She has 4 brothers, this male friend as well of theirs, and they all go their separate ways. They don't necessarily all take the same stance during the Civil War. And yet she manages to remain loyal to all of them, no matter, you know, how partisan they are, no matter which tribe they choose to follow. She retains that loyalty and commitment to all of them. And I think that's possibly, and I've got to be really careful here because I'm not, you know, the fact that I'm calling it female fiction or whatever's, fabulous females, whatever. I think, you know, there are certain qualities that perhaps are promoted amongst females, or whether, I don't know whether it's nature or nurture or whatever it is, but certainly, you know, one of the things I really admired about her was her capacity to stay connected, no matter what the family was going through, and no matter what the political situation. And it doesn't mean that it was smooth for her either. That's not remotely what I'm suggesting. So I think all of those things really made me admire her. You know, I came away at the end of the novel admiring her as much, if not more, than I had at the beginning. And it's that persistence, it's that drive, it's that loyalty, it's that, you know, she has a capacity to force herself to do things that she is not comfortable with, but she follows her intuition, you know, things that she feels are the right thing to do, even though, you know, there may be other people who would disagree or be appalled by the choices that she makes. So she's kind of got the strength of her convictions, and she forms some really important and tight friendships along the way as well. So yeah, I just thought she was a really interesting starting point in terms of thinking about female characters. And I am going to do these in a kind of, I've chosen 10, that was number 10, so this is number 9, and work my way up to, at the moment, as I sit here today, the characters that perhaps I feel have had the most impact on me. So the next one is a very, very different character. So this is a fictionalized account of the life of Boudica, and this one's called Dreaming the Eagle, which is the very first, and I think it was a trilogy. There may be more, I can't quite remember. I know I read them all, and I read these about 15 years ago. And I suppose Boudica is iconic. Maybe it's not a surprise that she's, you know, that I've selected her in my top 10 fabulous females in fiction. But she's really striking because she's not necessarily what you might see in Manda Scott's portrayal of her. So this novel charts her kind of early history. I think it starts when she's, I want to say 11, but that could be wrong. She's certainly a teenager, and we see her a lot through the eyes of her brother as well. And she's red-haired, she's, you know, she's feisty in lots of ways, but actually she doesn't want to be a warrior. She wants to be a dreamer, because the wonderful thing about these novels is that they they create this kind of really spiritual, dreamlike, otherworldly experience for the reader. And I think they really capture, as far as we can, certainly for me, it felt like I'd been in a pagan world when I read this novel, and the way that the characters, and Boudica in particular, is really in tune with the deities that she believes in and with nature and that kind of thing. So being a warrior is not in her game plan, but she's selected to do it. So one of the things about her is that she's physically strong, she's physically really brave, but she also has this deeply spiritual, perceptive side to her, which is very, very important for her story. And her bravery is demonstrated very early on. The reason that she is selected as a warrior rather than a dreamer within her tribe is that she avenges the death of her mother by killing a man. I'm trying not to give spoilers away in these ponderings, musings, but of course it's always extremely difficult not to do that. So that's how you you become very aware. And there are some things that she does at the beginning. So she injures her arm, and she shows such grit and determination. So the description of her, her frustration at not being able to use her arm, and then at her sort of training herself and forcing herself to do all these really difficult things, because of course there's no physiotherapy or anything like that, in what is it, the beginning of the 3rd century AD, I think, that the story is set. So there's no sort of modern science that's going to put this all right for her, but with sheer grit and determination she managed to overcome this terrible injury and build up the strength so that she can be a warrior again. And I really loved that. I felt a real, her conflict about her sense of duty and her conflict about her situation and the direction that her life needs to take is played out brilliantly in this book. And I think is still resonant, because she is a woman in a man's world. It's a very, very different world to our own, but she's still got to sort of, prove herself and she's got to be on her toes in a way that, I think maybe modern women still do, but at least, well, no, it's not always true, is it, that our lives aren't threatened, but hopefully you understand what I mean. So I really, really, this book has really stayed with me, and in particular her character. And the other thing I love about her, and this is a thread through a lot of these novels I've realised, is her relationship with her brother, and the way that they feel about each other, that connection between them, is very, very important as well in this story. And next up is another story in which a sibling relationship between a sister and a brother is absolutely at the centre and forefront of this novel. And this is Anna by Niccolo Ammaniti. And all of these novels, I'm sure at some point I've probably talked about before on this channel, but it's really interesting when you start to look at them from a very different angle. And I read this, I don't know, about 6 or 7 years ago, probably. Now, this is the only novel I've chosen, I think, that's written by a man. And Niccolo Ammaniti, I just adore his writing. He's an Italian writer, so this is a translation. And all his books that I've read, and I think I've read most of them, they look at the underclass, they look at the poor, they look at the disenfranchised, they look at, people who are battling against the odds who've sort of almost dropped out of society, the invisible people, if you like, and who become visible because they're forced into violence and so on. And Anna is slightly different. It's got a slightly different feel to his other novels because it's a dystopic novel, and it's set on Sicily. It's contemporary. So basically what's happened is this disease, this virus, and this was written before COVID, this virus has struck the island of Sicily, and it's only affected the adults. So once you become an adult, you're gone. And I think it's been 4 years at the opening of the novel since the virus broke out. And Anna and her brother have survived, but obviously, you know, their parents have not. And this novel tells the story of their survival, and they're on the move, they have to scavenge, they have to, you know, there's no one else to protect them. They've only got each other. And again, one of the things I absolutely admire about Anna, one of the reasons she's so fabulous, is because of her loyalty and her commitment to her little brother. And she just never gives up on him, you know, even though she might feel like it, even though circumstances are against her. And again, she's very courageous. She's physically brave. She can fight off wild dogs, and she can fight off these crazy groups of children who've sort of really, you know, lost the plot because of the lack of adults. And she's had to grow up incredibly quickly, and yet, you know, the chances are her life is going to be very, very short. I think she's about 12 when the novel starts. So, you know, as soon as puberty hits, that's going to be a massive problem. So this kind of shadow hanging over her, and it means it's even more important for her to make sure that her brother is safe before anything happens to her. So it's her loyalty, it's her incredible resilience. And one of the things I've noticed as well is the patience and the observational skills that a lot of these females have. You know, she can bide her time, she can work things out, she doesn't jump to conclusions. She's really perceptive and clever. And quite crafty, and I you know, absolutely love that, and her sort of protective nature as well comes through over and over again. It's a rip-roaring read. It's the sort of book that you could sit and read in an afternoon. And you know, if you're a fan of dystopian literature, I just think there's something a little bit different about this, because it's the kids, you know, it's the kids that have got to cope without adults. So that was 10, 9, 8. That was number 8. So at number 7, we have Madeline Miller's Circe. Now, she is a divine character. She is a demigoddess. So we're creeping into different territory here. But the point about her is that although she's a demigoddess, she's probably more human than any of the characters that I've mentioned so far. I wasn't a massive fan, and I know this will shock people, of the Song of Achilles, because I've got my very own personal Achilles in my head, and it just didn't chime for me. It was always going to be a big ask, that. But when Circe came out, I think again I chose to read it for the Women's Prize. And I was absolutely bowled over by this book. I really, really loved it. And again, it's stayed with me. So Circe, I suppose, is most famous in classical literature for her encounter with Odysseus, the greatest hero of them all, who is an adventurer who's took part in the Trojan War, and he's journeying home. It's going to take him 10 years. It hasn't done at this stage. But he's on his way to get home to his wife, and he spends a year with Circe on her island. And Circe is on an island because she's been banished there by her family, because she is she becomes an outcast in her family, partly because she has the power of magic. And what's wonderful is that once she's banished to this very lonely island, and she has got handmaidens and things like that on the island, she's not completely solitary, and she does have animals and things, but she works at that magic. She uses this fantastic skill that she's been given, and she practices it and she rehearses it. And eventually she has several characters who wash up on the island, and it's really interesting to see the interplay between her and these characters. So, and again, I'm desperately trying not to give spoilers away. Now, the wonderful thing about Circe is her capacity to feel. She is deeply passionate. She's very, very in tune with her feelings. She's really emotional. And again, without giving anything away, she reveals the ability to form really positive, strong relationships. And I could not get her out of my head. Again, she's got this kind of otherworldliness, but she's also intensely human and passionate and feeling. And she doesn't allow, she sort of allows herself to let those feelings in, but equally doesn't allow them to completely overwhelm her, certainly not all the way through the novel anyway. So I think this is a wonderful example of a female writer going back and looking at, you know, classic literature and reinventing the female character at the center of that story and making her something much more three-dimensional, much more engaging, much more just rawer and much more plausible, certainly for the contemporary world. So I love that. And then finally, and this is, I suppose, I don't know, this to me, this surprised me when I was going through my shelves. The character of Gita in The Bandit Queens by Parini Shroff, because Parini Shroff, it's called The Bandit Queens because it is actually about a whole group of women. But at the centre of the story is this woman called Gita. Now, the story is set in a village in India, and Gita has been widowed, or at least everybody thinks she has, because her husband has simply vanished. And she's quite enjoying her widowed life. She's, you know, people are leaving her alone. There's nobody to, she doesn't have to be at anyone's beck and call all day. There's nobody to kind of tell her what to do. And that's a really interesting take, isn't it, on this society where, because Parini Shroff writes really well about, I think, about the situation of women in India, but also about the caste system as well. So because of her caste, Gita is not very, you know, high up in the society of the village either. So being a widow actually kind of gives her this breathing space to be much more herself and to actually make decisions for herself. And I love the way that she battles against this and resists that being changed all the way through the novel, despite the fact that everybody wants a bit of her. So, you know, her business, since her husband's gone, her business is thriving because she's a widow, so people are sympathetic, so they're more likely to buy her jewellery. And she's perfectly kind of at ease, taking advantage of that situation. And then a load of the other women in the village decide that they actually want a bit of this. They can see that Gita has changed since her husband died. And so she is invited to assist them in murdering their husbands. And it's an amazing book because it's really funny. You know, there is a scene in there which I have never ever forgotten, and I really wish somebody would make it into a film because it would be sensational. Maybe somebody has, I don't know, I really hope so. But I just love the idea of this sort of, the idea of being widowed, not being a liberation, and isn't that a horrendous commentary on society? But nevertheless, equally, isn't it amazing that Gita can see that herself, and that she tries to sort of hang on to this newfound independence? Yeah, so she has really lived on with me well after, I think I read this 2 years ago now, so well after I've, you know, finished reading the book. So I commend her to you. So that's my first 5 females, fabulous females from fiction, or fabulous fictional females. I can't remember what I've decided to call this video. And I really hope that's got you thinking about your fabulous females. And maybe you could add in the comments below your own choices. But also, I don't know, I thought it might be fun because I don't know when I'm going to record the second video today because I'm in the mood, but I need a break now. And I wonder whether you can predict any of my subsequent 5. I think that would be really fun to see whether you can guess who any of them might be. So I leave you with that little teaser, and it may be another week or 2 before the next video goes out. I'm not sure, because I'm off doing things. It's the summer, and I'm off visiting relatives and doing all that kind of lovely stuff. So I'm not quite sure the rhythm of how the videos are going to roll over the next few weeks. But anyway, hopefully before too long, I'll be able to push my second Fabulous Females video out into the ether. So take care, everybody. Happy reading. Enjoy. Bye.